here from the AWS Theatre at Hannover Messe. I'm David Ariens. Together with me is Willem van Lammeren. Both of us write the IT/OT Insider. And in this panel, we'll be talking about the importance of building a scalable data foundation, solving the problems that need to be solved, right, Willem?
Exactly. Thanks, David. So today we are joined by Magnus Akesson, Worldwide Head of Industrial Solutions and Go-to-Market at AWS. We have John Werling. He's our Senior Solutions Architect for Mission Ops at MSA Safety, a leading global manufacturer of safety products for industry and first responders. And the other John Harrington, the co-founder and Chief Product Officer at HighByte. Welcome.
Sir, thank you.
Gentlemen, let's kick this panel off, John, by you. So let's start with your journey at MSA Safety. Tell us a bit about the company, your role, and of course how you came to use HighByte and AWS.
Sure. So I was a consultant for many years, a Lean Six Sigma consultant. About 10 years ago, that consulting firm started a startup in the energy analytics space. That firm became very good at harvesting building automation data from systems just like the one you saw to do measurement and verification. Eventually we sold that company and I wanted to get back to my passion of manufacturing, but with all the new knowledge I had about how to harvest data to solve problems. And then when the MSA opportunity came up, it was terrific. And you know, I think they're struggling with a lot of the same things most manufacturers are. We have a lot of random technology projects that have occurred over years, a lot of legacy issues. And very early in my tenure, we had a young engineer who brought up the idea of HighByte could be a potential solution to solve these issues. But MSA makes safety products all over the world, including connected worker products for safety, fixed gas and portable gas detection devices. Those are connected to a connected worker platform on an application built on AWS. So we had a long history with AWS, and our chief digital officer connected us with the AWS team who described the industrial data fabric, which included HighByte, and we started thinking maybe we were onto something about building a foundation that could help us solve problems. So.
All right, cool.
Yeah, so John, your background is in Lean.
Yes.
So maybe could you elaborate on how you went from Lean into this, let's say, more digital space?
Sure. So we had an IT group within that consulting firm that worked it, so I always collaborated with ERP projects with that team. But for me, digital transformation is really just the next generation of Lean transformation. In the early days, when I was, many years ago, when I was starting out in Lean, the old timers were really big on de-emphasizing digital. In fact, they would try to tell you, you should be able to manage everything you can with simple Kanban cards and whiteboards. The only time you interacted with a software system is you would be taking paper trackers from the shop floor all day, and somebody would batch enter those in the system. And so, you know, it was a very disconnected process, the physical process from the digital process. But you start realizing in a modern era that that's just not going to get you where you need to go. If the people you need to communicate with are in a different building, maybe in a supply chain in warehouses states away, that you want real-time information. If you want to make data-driven decisions in a fast-changing environment, you have to start at some point recognizing the flow of value. So if Lean really is about understanding what's value, optimizing the flow of that value, historically focused on the flow of materials and maybe machines. I think digital transformation is recognizing that data has a lot of value. It has value as part of the feedback process for continuous improvement in the process, for improving your products, but also with companies like MSA, we actually include a lot of that shop floor data in our value-added offering by selling some of that to the connected worker platform that we have. So just recognizing that data has value, and if data has value, you need to optimize the flow of data and transforming it and processing it so that it has its full value, just like you do with your materials and anything else that has value.
So I have a question for you there, John. So as you mentioned, you know, Lean is very much about the physical, right? It's about the physical flow, it's about culture, and it's about doing waste elimination along the way to create, again, that seamless flow.
Yes.
And a lot of times we get pushback from the lean practitioners that we don't need tools. But in my view, what we often miss out is that a big part of the physical flow is also that information flow.
Yes.
Connecting data streams, moving data from one point to another so that it can be consumed to provide context for an upstream action and what have you. So tell me about how at MSA you were able to sort of drive that sort of standing up a parallel stream and create flow in both the digital and the physical world, and how it created better outcomes.
Yeah, great question. So it actually does take some patience. It takes some sales effort every day to try to convince the leadership who is bought into lean. We have a management business system and a continuous improvement program at our company. But anyone who's been involved in trying to solve problems, I have a Six Sigma black belt from a data-driven system, has come across a time when they had a hypothesis they wanted to test and the data was not available to them. And more often than not, you find out that data is automatically collected by some machine somewhere, but we never knew what to do with it, so we purged it, right? So part of me says if the machines are speaking anyway, and in this day and age, you can't get a water cooler that's not digitally connected and enabled and providing data, you might as well be harvesting that data. And if you can, at the point of data collection, properly contextualize that, just like you would serialize with a label of product so you know where it came from and when it came from, and have all that context, you can build that back and really use that to solve problems. So you have to give that vision to the leadership group and say, we have to stop thinking about solving one problem at a time, but think about how do we build a platform that enables us to solve next year's problems and the year after's problems, even if we don't know what those are yet.
Do you also see, John, where data can point you to where you need to perform the lean project? Right? The data, being able to collect the data, will tell you where the problems are that you then need to send a Six Sigma black belt in to solve that problem. And then after the fact, data proves that you're still staying on that process that the black belt determined instead of going back to old practices.
Yes, absolutely. So at the energy company, we did what was called investment grade energy audits, and we had measurement and verification had to meet financial criteria to actually enable loans and mechanisms. And that means it has to be measured from first points. So for me, when people use back of the envelope ROI calculations, it drives me a little bit crazy. And I think, we get data from the field, and if we can have the proper context to that data, we can almost recreate any scenario. But at the energy company, we did all the transformation and contextualization of that data with a lot of manual effort and engineer spending. Probably 80% of our time was transforming that data so it was usable in that analysis. The tools we have today in the industrial data fabric allow us to automate that process, so that you get to the point where a QA manager says, hey, I hypothesize that maybe humidity issues on the shop floor are causing failures in the field. We are 20 minutes away from solving that problem. Now, is MSA quite there yet? No, but that is the vision, and that is the vision we describe every day when we're trying to sell this to leadership, that this is where we're going to go. Somebody has a hypothesis. We are minutes away from the data in our fabric to answer those questions.
Could I just elaborate a bit more on that, because you have a contextualization problem, but I'd like to take a look to the other two gentlemen here. Is what do you see happening in the industry overall? What are the trends? Maybe John, what are the difficulties when we talk about about contextualization?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, because the challenge with data is we have lots of systems and we have lots of machinery that produce data that was designed to run that machine. But now we have to use it, and we have to use it for a lot of different use cases that the machines were never put in place for. So, for instance, if you're looking at quality or you're looking at throughput, the machine was there to just run itself and drive the product through. Now we need to contextualize that data for these new use cases, and we need to do it at scale. Because, to John's challenge, how do I know where to set the black belt? We need to collect all that data, do it at scale, and then we can say we need a project to solve this problem. So the contextualization, and then where do we land all this data? We have massive volumes of data. Well, that's where AWS comes in.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and to build on that, so what we're seeing is that data really becomes the center at the core of everything that you do. And you have to learn how to become a data-driven organization and learning how to manage your data as a product. And drive scale by managing it in a way where you can consume it for multiple use cases. So we can take a very simple example of a time series stream of, say, current. Comes from about any, you get current from just about any piece of equipment out there on the shop floor, and you have multiple personas looking at that data. There's energy monitoring and consumption, there's predictive patterns on spikes or drift in current that can indicate either quality or a maintenance problem. Different personas looking at the same data in a different context. You have different needs for the fidelity of that data. A data scientist is going to want to have very high fidelity in that data to be able to build machine learning models. But to visualize it, you need to look at it in a much more aggregated level. And being able to not only contextualize the data, but also build data models and products that allows you to easily consume that data at scale is the key to enable multiple use cases on the same data set and then scale at, a marginal effort.
Do you start with the use case? Do you start with the model?
You have to learn to work on two speeds. You can't be curating data and building a platform for the sake of building a platform. You can't go build use cases one off after the other because you will never scale. That's how you will end up in this famous, POC purgatory.
Yeah.
So in my book, it's not one or the other. You have to learn how to do both. And I believe, John, you've had some experiences with that at MSA.
At MSA, I collaborate very closely with our operations technology team. And their job is very much to think about the current use case and to solve the problem in front of them. And my job, and this make me a pain in their butt sometimes, but my job is to help them think about tomorrow and how this scales up and to think about, and so, so I want to get one of those coffee mugs that says, hold on, let me overthink this. Because sometimes I feel like, well, maybe I am overthinking it a little bit, thinking about 3 use cases from now. But I think it is really helpful because I think that's where we're trying to go.
I think what we see is it's not so much a specific use case, but it's more a domain.
Yeah.
So are we collecting asset data? Are we collecting product data? Now, product data can be used for a lot of different things. We can look at quality, we can look at traceability, we can look at, lots of different use cases. Or are we looking at process data? But if you think of it in those domains, then you can define the model to collect the data, but then you use that data across many different use cases.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I want to say, to me, I try to educate, from an AI perspective, there's 2 kinds of AI in manufacturing. There is millisecond data that you could take vibratory information off of a motor and start predicting what's going on with that motor and its bearings. But then there are also, you don't need millisecond data to publish in the cloud to get very long-term data that can tell you additional information. And so, and you actually see a lot of these use cases in different areas, and you have to think about, which one do you want to do in the edge, which one do you want to do in the cloud, and that's where the architecture piece comes in.
So let's move over to another topic here. I'm sure all of us have experience with this. I'm sure the audience has as well. Is this balance between, on the one hand, setting up a proper data fundamentals, on the other hand, delivering something fast. Now the problem with that is that typically leads to patchwork, unconnected solutions, and that might seem okay, but I would say the result of that is you will never be able to scale those out. So I don't know who wants to go first here, but maybe John, you probably have some things to share.
Yeah, we had an operations leader who liked to say that we suffered from random acts of technology for that exact reason.
Random acts of technology.
And people, I guess, often say they get into pilot purgatory, right? They just do these quick wins, and they're just. And so for me, it is very much the difference between thinking about an application that solves the current use case and a platform that you can scale. And as I said before, I think to sell it, in manufacturing, In our R&D, they think long-term on their ROIs. In manufacturing, they're used to, if it's not a 3-month payback, why would we do it? So you have to learn how, if you're going to innovate in manufacturing, to have a little bit more patience, that you get your paybacks on the portfolio, and that you have to articulate that there are some infrastructure problems that are a prerequisite. And you have to be able to articulate that big picture vision. But I think to your point you made before, you have to couple the use case and the infrastructure projects together. So, we go forward with our first use cases and we try to get as much of the infrastructure in place in that use case that we know will be reusable for the next use case.
Yeah.
Does your pitch change depending on the stakeholder that you're giving your vision to? Because all those initiatives don't just depend on one department that needs to buy into the story.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think those of us close to it, we even talk about the different ways we sell it to different groups and how we pitch it, and we make sure that we have because it's like any transformation effort. It's a change initiative, and you have to communicate it vigorously, and you have to be able to articulate not just what we're doing today, but over the long term. I will say, and it's a challenge every day. I definitely have that challenge every day. And we worked on a visioning process in the beginning. Our vice president of operations has been patient with us. I don't think he's going to be patient forever. He definitely is a can-do, let's get results kind of guy. And I think that's going to, we're going to have to get our ROI before too long. But I think he also understands that we have this legacy systems that we have to work we have technical debt from these random acts of technology that we have to work through. So I think he's been somewhat patient.
And I think part of that also is to really have a strong culture of experimentation and iteration. So for example, I remember doing a lot of Kaizen workouts in my prior life on building custom carts for moving materials from one station to another. And they're beautiful carts, and they're ingeniously designed. And we're like, how did this happen? Well, the way it happened is that we started with icicle sticks and glue guns, building prototypes. And then we moved on to 2x4s in a wood shop, built some prototypes with wood. And then we welded a Frankenstein, like this really ugly cart, and we tested it on the production line. And then we built this beautiful cart, right? We learned through experiment interpretation. And that is the physical flow. Again, coming back to the information flow, I see the same analogy here of running Kaizen workshops, building these data flows, information flows, breaking things along the way, experimenting and learning, but staying focused on that outcome of improving, whether it's safety, quality, delivery, or cost. To me, these same principles need to apply also in the world of digital.
And to your point, and what you were asking before, right now I'm struggling to get IT to buy in to the experimentation piece of the pilot. They would like to see a fully designed solution before we deploy. And I'm saying that's not even possible. We know what outcomes we want to do. We know the inputs. We've never used this particular technology before. But we are working with them that we have go, no-go gates. So before we scale, we have to define what the scalability criteria are and what we have to know. But in the pilot process, we need to buy patience. We need to be able to experiment a little bit in this process and be agile.
The interesting thing that we see, though, is it's really clear when you build it out of popsicle sticks or 2x4s that you're not going to reuse that for production. In the technology world, sometimes people try to build it out of popsicle sticks and 2x4s and then use it.
Yes.
And so the key is to recognize that has proven the value, but the approach is not scalable. So now let's transition into a more scalable architecture. Let's make the investment for the architecture, and then we can deliver and scale, because we don't want to create too much technical debt trying to make the 2x4 unit work for us when it's never going to get there. And so, we see that challenge there. I think MSA has done a great job with that transition.
Well, and that is exactly, you need the patience there, right? And then you find that your pilot takes a lot longer than you realize, because whereas you prove the value early, you have to rethink the architecture for scale. And so now you want to go back and take that pilot and basically rebuild it for a production-ready system.
Right.
And that takes, a lot longer than you originally anticipated. And now you have to go back and explain to everybody why we're not quite ready to go from crawl to walk yet. So
But the power is, you can do a lot of things with some prototyping technology. But if you can put in this technology, I think you can put in, the technology today, and you make some investment, but you can then rapidly deliver value. It's just we need to make the investment on putting in the core.
And that is our goal, is that it's wash, rinse, repeat once we get a scalable design. And so we go with exponential speed
Right.
when we start deploying at scale.
Right. And that's what we see.
Can we go for a final question? How do you envision data ops changing in the years to come at MSA? What is going to happen?
Well, I mean, not to use every buzzword that we see on every monitor here, but the digital thread, the industrial data fabric, the digital twin. But I mean, I think what we envision is a completely integrated physical and digital process end to end, so that we can trace a device and that asset and its performance in the field. We get that data seamlessly pooled in and integrated and contextualized at every step, so that we can predict what the outcomes will be based on actual operating parameters, not only on the shop floor, but when that device is in the field and in extreme weather conditions or whatever, and we can use all of that data to feed back in the process. And instead of using expensive engineers who transform that data, we start using AI to start telling us this is what's happening before we even knew to ask the question. And that is the vision. I think that's what everybody here is trying to do. We're just realizing how much time it takes to get the base pieces right, so the rest of that can happen quickly.
And from AWS perspective?
So I think, I used to say a lot that your AI is only as good as your data, right? You have to start with a data foundation and so on and so forth, which leans itself to data ops, right? Owning your data, owning the quality of data, the completeness of your data to build the right type of models that can make the right decisions about whatever problem you're solving for. I now believe we are at an inflection point when it comes to generative AI, to apply generative AI also to that data problem, right? We've all seen how 5 plans had 5 different names for the same type of asset, and manually trying to reconcile and manage these taxonomies and that you need to be able to deliver that kind of scale. And I think with generative AI and also an agentic approach on top of that, we will also truly transform the way we do data ops in the future.
So that you can take messy data and it can begin to make sense of messy data. And that was what I always assumed would be the long-term vision. We've had a couple of use cases where we've done some data cleaning with AI, and I still feel like there's a lot of manual deciphering and creating the rules and tweaking that. But you're right. I mean, I would assume. I mean, right when that technology is perfected is when we'll have clean data anyway, because we're doing it with HighByte. So.
That's right. And we like to think of it as there's AI for data ops, and then there's data ops for AI. So AI is helping you contextualize the data and make the data and scale that out, because we've got vast quantities of data. But then data ops is required for AI, because fundamentally the data is the oxygen for AI. Without data, the AI is dead. It doesn't do anything. It just waits. But with data, it can act and it can help deliver value for MSA.
Willem, we need another half an hour, I guess.
I think so. Tell the guys that we're continuing. No, let's wrap up here. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Magnus. Thank you to the audience. If you still want to talk to us afterwards, we'll still be at the booth here. And, well, I wish you all a pleasant fair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.